All right, welcome everybody to today's live webinar. Today we are covering Microsoft Word. This is our part 2 of the series that we have. Last week we did was it last week?
Yep,
Yes.
part 1 was last week.
Last week we did part 1. So if you need the video for that, you weren't able to attend, let us know. We can make sure you get that. We usually put them up on YouTube after we're done with the editing and captions and everything. So if you need that, let us know. We'll have our emails up at the end as well, so you can ask questions that way. Before I get started and introduce our technology librarian, Susan Winkler, I just want to mention a couple things about the library. We are closed to the public, but we are still here in the building. You can see I'm sitting in a meeting room right now. And we are here to answer questions for you. We're still doing programming, so feel free to give us a call or email us or anything if you have questions. We are also still doing curbside. So if you want to pick up your holds via curbside, you can always schedule an appointment by giving us a call, or we have a curbside form on our website, champaign.org. We are still offering our book a librarian service as well. So if you want some one-on-one help with a staff member, we can book you a book a librarian appointment, basically. And what you'll do is you'll go on our website, champaign.org/book-a-librarian. So I'll put that in the chat as well to that link. And then once you get on that site, you'll fill out that form of what you're kind of hoping to learn during your appointment. And then someone will get into contact with you, and hopefully we'll get that question answered for you. Let me also talk about some Zoom stuff too. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and you hover your mouse over there, you'll see kind of two different icons. So one is a chat icon. It looks like a chat bubble, like a speech bubble. If you click on that, you'll have a chat window come up and you can type in questions there. While Susan's doing the presentation, I'll be in the wings, I guess. It's a kind of a good Wizard of Oz metaphor. I'll be the man behind the curtain answering all the questions while Susan's doing the demo. So if you have those questions, I'll be able to help. You can also raise your hand too. So if you click that raise hand icon, we'll see that as well. We like to use the raise hand icon so that if you want to speak your question, you can do that rather than typing. I know sometimes you may have a longer question and it might be easier just to say it rather than type it. So feel free at any point to raise your hand and we can see if we can unmute your microphone so you can ask it in person. And again, just don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we're here for at any time. You know, if we're getting past something that we already covered, that's okay too. Just ask questions. That's our main thing. Okay, so I think that's all I had to cover. Did I say my name? I'm Rebecca Van Dusen. I'm a library associate here at the Champaign Public Library. I think I forgot that last time too. I just like to dive in. But I am a library associate here at the library. I work with Susan to help with the tech webinars, and I also work at the information desk. So you've probably seen me there before. Okay, without further ado, hi Susan, how are you today?
Hi, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm okay.
Good, I'm also doing well. I'm excited to get back into some Microsoft Word tricks and help everybody learn how to use it a little bit better. And I was going to mention too, if you go to champaign.org/events, you can also see our other upcoming workshops, and I will mention those at the end as well. And we do have a part 3 for Microsoft Word, which will be after on the 29th, I believe, whatever the Tuesday is. That's not this coming Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that. So I think it's the 29th. Or the 28th, let me check the calendar real quick. It is the 29th, yes. So on the 29th, we will have our part 3. And then our spring season will start, and we'll do things like tablet classes, and we'll do Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint and all of those. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get started here for Microsoft Word today. We're going to do a couple of things that we covered last week as well, including how to create documents and then how to save them to get everybody started. And then we'll jump into the stuff we're covering today. So if you give me one moment, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to go ahead and share my entire screen here. Okay. So if you're looking now, I'm going to minimize that. So you should see the desktop here. And then I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint here. And we'll go ahead and start that slideshow. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the Intro to Microsoft Word Part 2
Yes.
now.
Susan,
Perfect.
also before we get started, I want to maybe ask something we kind of talked about before is before we jump into it, maybe everybody wants to put in the chat like what kind of computer you're using. Are you using a PC or are you using a Mac? Because some Mac things are slightly different, and if we have a question about that, I can look that up later, and we can
Yes, yeah,
put
that's
those in
great.
an email out.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
maybe a good thing to know is maybe what you came to the webinar hoping to learn. So if you have anything that you specifically want answered during the webinar, just feel free to put that in the chat as well, and we'll hope to answer that during the webinar or after the webinar as well.
absolutely, yes. I want to make sure we have an outline of stuff that we're going to cover today, but I always like to make sure that people are getting out of what the workshop, what they need to get out of it. So if you have specific questions, we're always happy to take specific questions as well. Even if we can't cover it in the actual flow of the presentation, we'll cover it at the end. Or again, we can reach out to you individually too with the book of librarians and everything else. And it also helps us to plan future sessions. So if there's something specific that somebody wants to learn, it helps us to plan what we should include in the future too. It also gives us a chance to be a little bit more interactive too. So I know for me, at least right now, I know I'm speaking to folks that are out there in the world somewhere, but without seeing faces and having people raise hands in person. It's nice to have that feedback and that treating things more like a conversation. So please interrupt me whenever. I do have some built-in spots where we'll stop and pause for questions too, but feel free to interrupt us at any point in time. Okay, so if you want, feel free to pop into the chat what you're hoping to learn about today, or if you have any specific questions about Word. And I'll go ahead and head to the second slide. Thank you, Rebecca, for reminding me about that. So here are some of the things we're definitely going to cover today. How to access Word 2016. 2016 is the version that we're using today because that's the version that we have on our computers here at the library. You may have access to Word 2013, older than that, versions that are older than that, or you may have Office 365, which is the online version that has Word 365. Word 365 is pretty similar. A lot of it's going to look pretty much the same. If you have Word on your Mac, a lot of it's going to look the same, but the keyboard shortcuts will be slightly different. And there are some differences that we can talk about too. So, okay. We'll learn about creating and saving documents, how to copy and paste text, how to format your paragraphs once you've got a paragraph typed out, including text alignment. So that's whether or not your text is in the center or justified to the left or the right, or when you justify it so that it wraps. We'll talk about line and paragraph spacing. So these are going to be ways to make it look easier on the eyes when you're printing your documents out. We'll talk about indenting, and then we'll cover margins, which should have shown up before the top here. Okay, orientation and size, and columns, those are all part of the layout. So formatting the layout, which will include the margins, the orientation, whether it's portrait or landscape, the size of your paper that you're using, and then how to create columns. And then we'll do a little bit with lists. So we'll talk about inserting a bulleted list. So that's helpful if you're doing things like creating a resume, or maybe creating like a grocery shopping list, things like that. Numbered lists, where it's things that actually have a step-by-step instruction to them. And then multi-level lists. And then we'll spend some time with proofing, spelling and grammar, using a thesaurus to see if you want to use a different word. And then lastly, we'll talk about find, replace, and select. So a lot of the things we're going to do today are dealing with formatting the text, and then also proofing and like spelling and grammar, and reviewing what you've got. Okay. So on our computers here at the library, the way we usually access Microsoft Word is to go into a folder for Office on our desktop and then find Microsoft Word. On yours, you might have it already on your desktop, so you just double click on the icon for it. Or if you have Windows 10, like we do here, you can also search for it in the box down below in the left-hand corner, and just type Word 2016 in there to get into Word. Okay, and we'll do a live demo of this in just a second too. Then you can decide if you want to create a blank document, which means you're starting basically from scratch, or you can use a template. Templates might be something like a resume template, a 2-column newsletter template, a flyer, whatever you're interested in creating. And then once you've created it, you will then save it. And so the big difference between saving something, we talked about this last week with save and save as. And if you didn't attend last week, save as is recommended for the first time you're saving a document. And to do that, you can click on File and then select Save As. And then you basically, the nice thing with Save As is you get the opportunity to pick where you want to save it, where you want to save it on the desktop or in your documents or whatever folder you want to put it into. The other thing that's nice with Save As is that it saves that as a copy. And then if you make any revisions to something, you can hit Save As to keep a separate second revision sheet. So you could have copy 1, copy 2, copy 3, copy 4, and then you would have all those files that exist separately. Whereas when you do save, it essentially saves over the top of the existing file. So anytime you make edits and you save it, it's going to save just that same one document. Okay, so just to go back over that real quick. And then, of course, like in this example, we'd saved it as the file name was practice. I don't know if you can see that down here where it says practice. And then you could click the save button. Okay, so you can also find that in the quick access toolbar. So again, if you've saved it for the first time and then you only want to keep the one document, you don't need all your revision history, you can just keep hitting the save button up in the top of the quick access toolbar. And the quick access toolbar, like we covered last week, is over here on the left-hand side. It's this little, I don't know if you can see the mouse that well, but I'm kind of where this red box is. If you were to extend that red box over to this little arrow, that would be your quick access toolbar. So we're going to go ahead and continue to use those terms that we learned last week. If you didn't make it for last week's class, again, we can share the video with you and you can catch up, and hopefully it won't be too hard. Okay, any questions about opening and saving? I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this live. Give me just a second.
I also want to say maybe if you click on that little window that's going to hide that where it says stop sharing and hide.
Oh, sure.
That little window is showing up for us too.
Let me pop it down here in the bottom corner.
Because it was sort of on a couple slides earlier.
Okay, thanks for mentioning that. I'll put it down here at the bottom. Okay, that way I can still remember that I'm sharing, but you don't have to see as much of it.
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to come down here to where it says type here to search. And for me, I'm going to just type Word 2016 so that it pops up here and I can go ahead and enter it this way, like that. And so here's where we see we can pick our blank document, or we could pick a template. And you can always search for online templates as well. I'm going to go ahead and start with a blank document and pop it in here. Now, if I'm ready, when I'm ready to save, so let's just do this is a document. So when I'm ready to save it, I can come up and just save it once, or I can do File, Save As, place it on the desktop, and give it a name. Now, we do have a class on file storage and organization where we help give you some tips on what we should actually, what are helpful ways to save files so you'll actually remember what they are. Today, we're not really going to pay that much time and effort into that, and we're just going to name it document 1. So that would be saving your document. Okay. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and so you can tell that it's changed. Let's save it as. Oh, come here. Cat 4. Okay, so save. So you can see up here that it's changed now from cat. Oh, sorry, we made it from to cat 4 up here at the top. That's where your title comes in. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead. Any questions about that? About saving?
Not so far.
Okay, I know that was kind of a quick whirlwind there, but again, we do go over that in last week's session too. So if you need a refresher, let us know. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to jump back into our PowerPoint here, and oops, sorry, from current slide. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Next thing we're going to talk about is copying and pasting text. So this is a very, very useful thing to know how to do, and it translates to other programs and other pieces of software as well. Being able to copy and paste text is a super useful thing to do. So we're going to go through it and talk about how to copy and paste. So the first thing you want to do is you want to highlight the text that you need to copy from wherever it is. It may be that you're taking information off of a website and copying it into a Word document. You may be copying something from a work document someone sent you and putting it into a new document. But either way, the way to do that is to highlight the text first. And to highlight, you want to hold down your left mouse button and then move the cursor across the text that you want to copy. It can be a little tricky. It is one of those mousing skills that can take some practice, but that is one way to do it. And later on, I'll show you a way to do it without having to highlight it yourself. But the space behind the text is then going to turn a different color. So in this case, it's blue. Sometimes it's gray, just depends. And then you can move the cursor over a portion of the highlighted text, and you can right-click and say copy, and then that will copy that text. And what it does is it basically places it on the clipboard so that then you can paste it wherever you want to paste it. You can also use keyboard shortcuts to accomplish the same thing. So instead of right-clicking and selecting copy, you can also use the shortcut keys Control and C to copy on a PC. Rebecca, do you know what it is on a Mac? I think it's the Option. Is it Option or Command?
I believe it's Command C.
I think it's Command C. So
Yes.
for a Mac, it would be Command C. And then when you're ready to paste, which we're going to talk about in just a second, you can use Control V as in Victor or Command and V as in Victor if you're on a Mac. Okay. So then you basically will take, once you've copied it, so you've done your Control C, Command C, and you've copied your text, you will move the cursor to wherever you're going to want to paste that text. Could be in a different program, could be in a different part of the same document. And then you right-click and say paste, or Control V as in Victor, or Command and V as in Victor. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that in just a moment in a live demo here. So let's jump back out here. Hoping you can see my full screen here. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm going to go into, so I've got a website that I've pulled up over here. This is from the Gutenberg, it's basically like an online source for books that are no longer in copyright with Project Gutenberg. So we can copy the text here and just take it and paste it wherever we need to take it and paste it. So just for the example purposes for today, what I'm going to do is come over here to and copy that by first highlighting it. So I'm going to highlight this whole first chapter, hold down the left mouse button, and go ahead. And I'm going to use the scroll wheel on my mouse to advance my scroll bar. And if you see the scroll bar, it's off on the very right-hand side between those two arrows, and it should start moving as I move through to this chapter. Now, what I mean when I say that it's tricky, you can go too far and get some extra text that you didn't want. Sometimes it's hard to get it right where it needs to be. So I've also hopefully made my mouse a little bit bigger so you can see a little bit better how it's working here. I don't know. And then once you've highlighted your text, you can see it's in a different color. I will right-click somewhere over the top of the text that's changed the color and say copy. Okay. Once I've copied it, then I can go ahead and paste it wherever I want to paste it. So for me, I'm going to want to paste this in a new Word document. So at this point, I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to, again, search for and open Microsoft Word. I'm going to open a blank document. And then here's where I want to paste my text. So if I'm going to paste it right away, I can right-click and say paste and just paste it. And these are the different options for pasting. So you can paste with source formatting, which means it keeps all of the same, it keeps the same font and the same style. And you can, or you can keep the text only. We're going to go ahead and say keep source formatting for right now. And then here is all of our text that has been included. Okay, so that's an example of copy and paste. Now, if I want to, again, if I want to save this, I can go up to File, Save As. We'll save it right to the desktop, and we'll call it Wizard of Oz. Now, okay, and we're going to hit Save. Okay, so now you can see up at the top, that is now changed to Wizard of Oz. Okay, and I capitalized O and Z. I think they don't. Anyway, okay, so now if you look at this though, you see that there's this little tab here, This is because this has kept the formatting coming from the website. So if I don't want, and you can see here that it has a little, this one comes in just a little bit here at the beginning of this paragraph. You see where it says Dorothy, and there's like this little bit of space here. That was put in there because that's the spacing and formatting that was already on that website. If I don't want to use the spacing that's already on the website, I can actually delete all of this text out. And when I take the text from here, so this is back on that website, and I right click and say copy, if I don't want any of that existing format, there's a program you can use called Notepad. And Notepad takes out all of that formatting that already exists. So it takes out the spacing and the paragraphs and everything else. So if I come in here and I do edit, paste, so basically I'm pasting it in here first, then I can take edit, and I can hit select all, and it'll do that same highlighting. So this is a quick way to highlight everything where you don't actually have to take your cursor and scroll through everything. Okay, and again, I can hit right click and say copy, and then I'm just going to minimize this for a second. I can go back to my Word document. Does everybody see where my Word document is just down here in the taskbar? I can open this up and I can say paste again. And this time, you see how now it's all the way over this side. It's not in the center, and it doesn't have those same little bits of text coming across. This text has not, the text where it says Dorothy lived hasn't come in a little bit. That's because we took out that formatting. Okay, so now we can play with it just because it's text. Okay. Okay. Well, any questions about that? About copying and pasting?
I don't see any so far.
Okay, it can take some time to get used to it and how to do it too, but hopefully it won't take too long for everybody to get more familiar with it and practice with it. It is a very nice thing to know how to do for just about anything that you need to do with computers. And it's always good if you need to copy something to try that first. Try copy and paste.
Someone is asking if you can repeat it.
If I can repeat the copy paste?
Yes.
I sure can. Yeah, let me go ahead and I'll take out this text here and show you again. Okay, so when I'm on the website here and I've highlighted the text that I want to copy and then paste somewhere else, right click and say copy, or Control C or Command C on the computer, and then open up the place that you want to put it. So here, that would be this guy. And if you want the existing formatting, you can just go ahead and paste it in there. If you don't want the existing formatting, you can open something called Notepad, and you can paste it here. So let's go ahead and I'll just exit out of this Notepad and we'll do Notepad part again. Don't save. So I'm going to open Notepad again down here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And then I'm going to right click and say paste, and that's going to paste all of that text for me. Then I can select it all by going to edit, select all, right click and say copy. Now you could also do edit, copy. So the keyboard shortcuts and the mouse shortcuts are just to make it a little easier for you to get to it. You can always go to edit, copy, edit, paste too. Okay, and then from right here, gonna right click and say paste, and then it'll paste it in there for us. Okay.
Can you also go over, Susan, I know there's a button that you can use in Word itself that will erase the formatting without having to go into Notepad.
Yes, so that is up here where it says clear all formatting. It's the little A with the eraser. Generally, as long as you've highlighted all of the text, you can clear the formatting. Sometimes when you're copying stuff from the internet, though, it doesn't remove everything that you'd like. So, but it will remove formatting. It won't remove like highlighting background in the background and things like that, but that should strip the formatting. Yeah, that's this. Can everybody see that, the little eraser? It's in font, the font group here. This little guy here. I'll hold it so you can see it where it says clear all formatting. Okay.
It kind of looks like a letter A with like a
An eraser.
rubber eraser over it.
Yeah, it's an eraser. Yep. Okay. Okay. So now that we've got our text here, the next step that we're going to do is we're actually going to do the work of formatting it the way we want it to be formatted. And you'll see this a lot for if you're doing a flyer, if you're doing a paper for a class or for your job, that you have to move things in a certain way so that they look right when you print them out. Okay, so for the next couple of minutes, we're going to spend some time with this section of the Home tab. And if you remember from last time up here, these are the tabs. So we have the Home, Insert, Design, Layout, References, Mailings, Review, and View. Those are all tabs. And then each of the little sections down here, like Clipboard, Font, Paragraph, Styles, and Editing, those are groups. And then you have the icons, which are inside of those groups. So today we're going to spend a lot of time with the Paragraph group and a little bit of time with the Editing group that's over here on the far right-hand side, and then a little bit of time with Review, the Review tab where we have spelling and grammar, and the Thesaurus. Okay, so we're going to come back to Home, and we're going to spend some time with Paragraph now. And in this section here, the stuff that you have up here at the top, these will control lists, which we'll talk about in a minute. This will control your indents, which we'll talk about in a minute. Sorting would be something you would use if you had like a table that you'd put in here and you wanted to sort things like A to Z. We won't spend much time with that today. The show hide paragraph thing is something a lot of people use with advanced layout tasks. We won't cover it today. Don't have enough time. Borders, we won't cover those today. But if you want to add borders, you can add borders and shading. And here you can add shading and highlights to your text or paragraphs. We are going to spend time with our friend here. This is line and space, paragraph spacing. And we're going to spend time with these 4 icons here, which are your text alignment. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to play with our text alignment here. Now, if you want to align everything that's here in a certain way, what you'll want to do is select whatever text you want to align in a certain way. So you have, again, that highlighting becomes very important because you're going to highlight whatever you want to change. So if I've highlighted here, and let's say I want everything to be in the center. If I hit center, see how that moved it into the middle now so that it's between 2 and 4, roughly 2 and 4 on my ruler up here at the top. So now it's in the center justified for that piece of paper. So think of this, this digital piece of paper that we're looking at. Okay, so that's center. If we want it left justified, that would be this first one. That's left justified. Excuse me, pardon me. Or left align. To align it to the right, you could hit that. You see how it moves it over to the right-hand side. And if you wanted to justify it justify it where it wraps and gives you those crisp edges where nothing hangs over this, like here, if you see this, prairie of running, they, sun, see how sun is not right at the edge here of the text, but up here, everything is right at the edge. That's what happens when you justify. Okay. Any questions about that?
I don't see any questions about that, but we do have a hand raised.
Okay, sure.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me allow them to talk.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Susan. Yeah, I have a question about pasting. I noticed that when you copy something and paste it, it gives you 3 options. You can keep the formatting, you can merge the formatting, or you can something without the print, something without something. It's a third.
Yes.
How do you know, when do you know which one to use out of those three? Because I'm always if I copy something from the text and I put it into a new document, do I keep the formatting, or do I merge the formatting, or do I think the third choice is something like without print, without some letters or something?
Let's go ahead and, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy this again so everybody can see that real quick. So when I paste it and I right click and I have these three options: keep the source formatting, merge the formatting, or keep text only. And if you see when you hover over it, do you see how it's changing how it looks? Yes. So if I keep the source formatting, this is going to look more closely like how it did on the website, where it's going to be already centered in the middle, and then you'll have to play with whatever you need to play with on that side. If you hover over merge formatting, what it's doing is it's trying to follow the formatting you already have in your existing document. So if we already had a certain formatting structure that we were using here, it would follow that. And then if you keep the text only, that's like what we do when we take it into Notepad, where it kind of strips out all of that formatting stuff. So I recommend playing around with it based on what you're copying and pasting, and go ahead and use this where you see the live preview of it, where it would be keep source formatting, merge, or keep text only, and then click whichever one you want to use.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Susan, I think you're muted somehow.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty. Let me see if we can figure out what's going on with Susan's microphone.
I think I lost my connection there for a second. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I think
that's okay.
Had a brief blip out there. So sorry about that. All right, let me jump back to sharing my screen here. Fun when we get technical difficulties, right? And I'll move that back down there. Okay, so can anybody see the document again? So basically, yeah. So
yes.
when you're copying and pasting, you can look at those previews. Did we get that far? Did you hear that part? Where you can get to the preview part of it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so if I came up here and I just copied this and went into my document and pasted it, then I have the option. If I do it like this, it's keeping the formatting, but you can also strip it out. Okay, perfect. Okay.
I can send along a link of more of the in-depth use of copy and paste.
With the explanation of copy and paste and how to do the formatting. So the next thing I want to talk about, so we've talked about our text alignment, which as long as whatever you're selecting is what you can change. So if I select left justify for this paragraph, I can instead select right justify for that paragraph. I can select center for the title. So you can control which things get applied to which parts of your document too. And that becomes really important when you're highlighting and selecting things as well. So that's why I wanted to start with the highlighting and how to highlight something. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is how to change your line spacing and your paragraph spacing. Okay, so if I highlight this paragraph here, the quick shortcut is up here where it's the two little arrows facing opposite directions. And this is your line and paragraph spacing. If I hit the little button here, it gives me a pull down menu. And again, it'll give me a preview. So if I hover over it, this is now one line. This is 1.15, 1.2, and 2. So 2 is known as double spaced, and 1 is known as single spaced. So when you have an assignment that someone for classes perhaps, and someone says, oh, it needs to be double spaced, 12-point font, Times New Roman. This is how you can set that. You would know that double spaced is going to be 2, and Times New Roman would be your font that you would change over here in the font group. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make this 2-point, which is double spaced. So now you can see this one is double spaced. This one is not double spaced. So the first paragraph is now double spaced. Second paragraph is not. Okay. You can also play with that a little more in depth by going to the line spacing options, where you can pick from the preview list here. You can do indents, spacing, you can do all this stuff. But if you come down to spacing and it says line spacing, right now you see it says double. You can also select single, and it gives you a little preview of how it's going to look. At least one line, at least exactly, et cetera, et cetera. So you can play around with these a little bit too. The most common used ones are single and double. Okay, so we'll go back to single and say okay, and that puts it back to single spaced. Okay, questions about that? I want to mention the don't add, real quick, the don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. So if our paragraphs look exactly the same and we don't want to have this much space between them, we can also, when we select our document, we can say, don't add space between paragraphs of the same style, and that will smoosh them a little bit closer together. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how that looks. So if I grab both of these paragraphs at the same time, and I'm going to say line spacing options, we're going to make it double spaced, but we're going to say don't add space between them. You'll see here it's only adding that the one return line between it. Okay.
Someone is also just asking, can you show the line spacing tools again?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So if I want to change this paragraph from double spaced back to single spaced, I can come up here to the line and paragraph spacing, which is, it looks like 2 little arrows going north and south from each other, and tap on that. And the shorthand, 1 is single spaced, 2 is double spaced, but you can also go into line spacing options and then change it here and make it single or double. Okay. So we'll go back to single here and say okay. Okay, so sometimes you may have if you're trying to fit, for example, if you're formatting your resume and you're trying to fit your entire resume on one page, one page, one side, right? You might decide you want to put less space between your lists or your words. So you might want single spaced instead of double spaced because you're trying to fit everything onto one page, but you still want it to be legible. You still want it to look nice and have people be able to read it and absorb it easily. So that's why a lot of times that's why this stuff is really important to play with and sort of see what works best. Okay.
Sorry, someone's also asking, can you show paragraph spacing again?
Yeah, so we didn't, yeah, so the paragraph spacing is between your so here we have the 2 paragraphs. So I'm going to go ahead and make this single spaced again. So now these 2 paragraphs are single spaced. And if I highlight both of them together and I come up here to the line spacing, if I don't want to have spacing between the paragraphs, I check mark this little box here that will not add a space between them, and then click OK, like that. Okay, then it's only the 1 space there. So you see how that's just 1 space between them now instead of 2, so it's how close your paragraphs are together. Okay, good. I'm hoping that answered it.
I also included a link to GCF Learn Free, which yes. I will give to everybody at the end of class too.
Yes, and that's on our additional resources list as well. So they have a good tutorial of how to do these. So. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is indents. Now, one reason you might want to indent something is if, say, it's like a block quote from someone and you want to set it apart from your other paragraphs. So in this case, we have, let's say our second paragraph is like a block quote. We want to set it apart. So I'm first going to make it justified in the same way that the other one is, which is left. Excuse me, pardon me. I didn't bring water today. So we're going to set it aside like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to indent this paragraph. So what I'm going to do is highlight this paragraph, and then I'm going to use the indent here where it says increase indent. That's these two little ones up here that have the arrows going left or right. So you can decrease your indent or increase it. So if I increase it, that moves all the text to be justified, still left justified, but moved, or left aligned, but moved further in. And if you see the ruler up here now, you can see how the gray space here, this is known as your margin. We'll talk about those in just a minute. And then you have this little bit of space here. And these indents here, these lines here, correspond to where you have indented that paragraph. Okay, so all of this is a way to help with legibility of what you're doing too. Okay, so that's setting it apart like that with an indent. If you accidentally indent too far, so if I did, like another one, and then let's say like that's too far, you can hit decrease indent and that'll move it back. And as you see, the up here at the top where the ruler is, this is also moving as you increase or decrease. And the standard is 0.5. So it's going to increase 0.5. So, if you have the one, this is 1 inch here. So this is 0.5, and that corresponds to on the page that you would print. So your paper, we'll get to the paper size in just a moment too. But I just wanted to show you the indents. So that's a fast way to do an indent of a whole paragraph. Now you might also only want to indent your first line of a paragraph to make it more legible. And for that, you can actually just use the tab key as a shortcut and just tab once. And then you see this indent here, how this one moved in. And you can even see if it'll pop up and say first line indent. So that's if you want to indent the first line of your paragraph. And you can do that on any one of them like that. Okay. Questions about indents?
I think we're okay so far.
Okay. There's also something called a hanging indent, which is a little bit more advanced. There aren't a whole lot of times where I've had to use this in my career and classroom experiences, but I do want you to know what it is. And a hanging indent is essentially where you indent all but the first line. And you can use the paragraph group here, and instead of using your 2 indentations here, this one requires you to use the paragraph dialog box, which this little, if you can see, and I don't know, because I know we don't have it bumped up quite big enough probably, but this little box right here at the bottom right-hand corner of the paragraph group, and you see you have one in the font group, the clipboard, and styles. These are the dialog boxes. So if what you're looking for is not here in one of these frequently, I kind of think of this as like frequently used icons, right? So the paragraph group here has these frequently used icons. If you need something else that relates to your paragraphs and it's not right here, if you tap on that little box, you're going to get the paragraph dialog box, which is going to bring other things up that you could possibly do. And if we look at indentation, this is mirroring what we did before, where you could indent your entire paragraph by 0.5 or to the right or the left, or you can come to the special stuff over here and you can do a hanging or first line. So the first line would be just like what the tab button did, where it moved in 0.5. The hanging is going to, and you can see down here in the preview, what the hanging is going to do is it's going to put that first word out and above the rest of it. So if I say okay to that, it's going to take a second here. Hopefully not too long to do it for me. Oops. I wonder what that did. Okay. So am I still trying to make sure okay, am I still sharing my screen? It just gave me another pop-up that I lost.
I saw the word pop up, but I'm not sure.
Okay. But everybody can still see. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, I can still see you in Word.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to go back to that paragraph dialog box, and I'm going to do a hanging and say okay. And then you see how that popped it in. So now Dorothy is set apart from the rest of the paragraph. That's called a hanging indent. Okay.
Can you also show how to get the rulers showing when you're on Word?
Yes. So, and that is something that I do have in the PowerPoint when we talk about margins. So it's going to come up in just a moment because I'm going to take them away and then bring them back. So,
okay.
So I can show it now too, though. For the margin, so the way to get your ruler to show up if it's not showing up by default, if you go into View and then Show, the Show group here, if you see that, and you see Ruler, and I have the check mark on Ruler. If I uncheck that, it takes away my rulers. So the really nice thing about having rulers is if you have them enabled, you can see how far in your indents are, what your margins are, and we'll talk about those in just a moment too for margins. And you can actually see the gray space here versus where your marcations are for what you're doing. Okay, and I'll show that again when we talk about margins in just a minute. You can also do grid lines. Grid lines are kind of fun. If you see, that's if I do grid lines. So if you need grid lines for like tables and things like that, you can do grid lines as well. Okay, so I'll leave the ruler there, and we'll do that again in just a moment too. But I did want to show you that paragraph dialog box. If you notice, a lot of the stuff that's in the paragraph dialog box is stuff you can get to using these things here too, like your alignment. Right now it's left. It could be centered. It could be right or justified. And again, that's these 4 little boxes right here. So your paragraph dialog box has all of these and more opportunities. Okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put that back to left. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take off that. I'll go ahead and take off our hanging indent here. Let me come back and I'm going to go back into my paragraph dialog box, and I'm going to change this so that we have none instead of having a hanging. Here we go. Come down here and say okay. All right, perfect. How's that look? Legible enough, even though Cyclone moved over?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you show how to get to the paragraph dialog box again?
Yes. So when you're up here in the group for paragraph, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and when you hover over it, it should do this thing too where it says paragraph settings, and then you tap on that, and that'll open the paragraph dialog box. Now, this is the same thing. This will happen also if you do, say, font, and you tap this one down here, that'll give you the font dialog box where you can change, your font. Same thing for clipboard. You hit here, it's going to bring up the clipboard dialog box, which for a clipboard, it comes up on the side because you're pasting stuff into your document, but it's the same idea. So each one of these, if you go to insert, let me see where's the other one that I can do with review. I think those are the only ones that have them are the font and paragraph. Where they will bring up those dialog boxes. But you'll see that throughout other Microsoft products too, where you'll have the ability to expand out and see other things. Okay. All right, any questions about paragraphs? If not, we'll move on to margins.
I don't see any so far, but I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to margins. I will work on the pacing of this for next time too. So we may go just a little bit over 3 o'clock, but let me go ahead and show you some margins. So your margins are basically the space between your text and the edge of the page. So, and if you have your rulers enabled, it's easy to see them because it's basically this gray space up here that should follow all the way through your document. So if you see how that text keeps lining up with that space right there, that's your margin. Okay. So if I come down here, oops, come down to Dorothy here, we got that. And then you can see the same thing is on the right-hand side here as the left-hand side. So this is known as the left margin and the right margin. You also have a top margin, which is signified over here on the ruler and is basically above the title. So this space right here where the header is. And then you also have the footer, which is where your bottom margin is down here. Okay. So if you need to change your margins to make things fit, so again, if we take the example of wanting to make sure everything can fit on one page for your resume, you might change your margins. So instead of having margins at 1 inch, I could put them at 1/2 inch, right? So when I come to do that, I'm going to move to a different tab. So instead of being on the home tab in the paragraph group, we're going to move to the layout tab, because the layout tab controls the overall positioning of our document. Okay, so we come down to margins, and we can see the normal is standard is 1 inch on all around. Narrow would be 0.5. So if I tap narrow 0.5, see how now that gray space went down. Now it's a 0.5 margin. So it means it's a 1/2 inch instead of 1 inch all the way around. Okay. Now, if I wanted to get all of my text for Wonderful Wizard of Oz to fit on 2 pages instead of 3 pages, well, this is one thing I could do to make that happen. I can adjust the margins. I can also do the things we talked about where I could change the spacing, and I could make it single spaced instead of double spaced. I could change how much space is between each paragraph. So there's lots of things you can do to edit your documents in those ways. Okay. So sometimes if you change a margin, you will end up doing too far for what the printers can print. So if I come up here to margins and I come down to a custom margin, which is down here at the bottom, excuse me, the custom margin down here at the bottom, I can actually change the top, the bottom, the right, and the left, and I can make them even smaller. So let's do like 0.2 for each one. Oops, I went the wrong way there. Hold on one second. Okay, 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2, and then hit OK. So it squeezes them in here. And this looks fine and good to me. So if I went to File and Print, I can see what it's going to look like when it prints. And look, now I'm down to 2 pages instead of 3 pages. This is where you can see down at the bottom here, kind of in the middle of the screen, if you can see, boy, I wish there was a way to highlight this better than this. If I hover my mouse here, you can see there's a 1 of 2. And if I hover, it can go in between the 2 pages. So page 2, page 1. So that we've gotten what was originally a 3-page document down to 2 pages by making the margins extremely narrow. Now, sometimes when you do that, if you're using that custom margin, so here I'm coming back to the custom margins, and I'm going to make it 0.1 instead. Oops. So we're going to go 0.1 and say OK. Now here we get our error message. Well, it's not an error message, it's a warning. So the warning that comes up is your margins are outside the printable area of the page. So this means that, you know, when the ink in the printer and the computer's basically sent and the printer's trying to resolve what it can actually print, it's telling you that it's outside. So what might happen is that your margins are cut off and some of your text won't be shown. So it might cut off like the T in today and the I in it. So if I hit fix, Word is going to automatically adjust it for me. So it went from 0.1 to 0.17. And that is what Word is saying is the acceptable range to print it. Okay. So I'll go ahead and say OK there. Questions about margins?
We have a question asking, can you demonstrate how you'd make all paragraphs 1 space apart?
Yes. So for that, we can select all of our text like this. And when we go to Home and Paragraph, we open the Paragraph dialog box, and we're going to check mark that box that says don't add space between paragraphs of the same style and hit OK. And then did you see how that just shrinks it in a little bit between each one of these so that now there's only 1 space between them like that? Except for down here. Now, if you see these right here, this actually has a little bit more space between it than right here. That's because these are not the same style of paragraph. However, if I pull these and I say, you know, because they're 1 sentence, and I say, you know, the don't add space and say OK, it'll shrink them closer together too. Did you see that? How that happened? So that's how you can do it for the whole document. You just have to be careful about making sure that you're actually doing it throughout your whole document, like this, and then don't add spacing. Okay, and then it'll pop it right in closer like that. Okay.
Can you also show how to do that with the print warning that comes up, how to fix that?
Yes. So when you're going to print and you've changed your, let me go back to layout. So when we've changed our margins, down here at the bottom where it says custom margins, this is where we can set what we want it to be. And if we had it at 1, oops, come on, go back, at 1 for each one of these, and we said okay, this is when we get that error, that not error, it's a warning. It's not an error message because there isn't actually an error. It's just reminding you that if you do this, it'll cut it off. You can say fix, and then it'll fix it to be as much as it thinks it can do. You can ignore it too, and if you ignore it, then you can take your chances and see if it'll print the way you want it to print. But I usually go ahead and say fix, so it fixes it for me.
And this is usually in a scenario where you're kind of really messing with your margins. On just a normal thing that you're writing up, you probably won't get to this point unless you're
exactly
trying to squeeze something in.
Yes, this might be, you know, if you've got a document that has a bunch of images in it too, and you want them to be right up at the edge of the page, things like that. It won't happen unless you're trying to make everything work to get a specific goal of fitting it all on a certain page. So, but I did want you to know that, because in case you've ever used Word before and you've had that message pop up, that's what that means. So, okay, great questions. All right, so I'm going to go back and show you how to find that ruler again. So if we go to View and then Ruler and hit that check mark in the Show grid, that'll show us our rulers. Okay, so, and then you can see the on the other side here, this is also if we have those shorter margins. This is what it looks like on the side for the top and bottom margins. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to layout and go back and make my margins normal again, so that it's a little easier for us to read the document too. Okay, now when you do print preview, file, print, and you get a preview, you can see how much 1 inch looks for your margin here on both of these pages, and then that it barely comes onto a third page. So if you really don't want it to be on a third page, you only want 2 pages, this is where that comes into play, where you might change the margins or put less space between the different paragraphs. Okay, that's one example of where you might want to do it. Okay, so the other thing I want to show you next is orientation. So your orientation on your layout, you can change your position to be landscape or portrait. Portrait is vertical, landscape is horizontal. So if I made this landscape and I go back to my preview for printing, now your page, your 8.5 by 11 page is like a landscape picture instead of a portrait picture. So it's like you've taken the piece of paper, and instead of holding it vertically, you've rotated it 90 degrees so that it's sideways, and then you're going to print it. Okay. So if you're making a flyer, maybe you'd rather have your flyer be landscape. Or if you're doing a resume, you'd probably want to switch it and make it vertical so that it's portrait style. But I just wanted you to know where you can do that and where you can change things. This comes into play more when you're doing things with like Microsoft Excel and you want to make sure your entire thing fits on one page. Sometimes you have too many things across, and you need to mess with that a little bit. Your size is your paper size. So in this case, we're using an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. If you've ever printed or seen legal paper is 8.5 by 14. So if I was to switch it to 8.5 by 14 paper and go to the print preview, now you can see it's much bigger. It's much wider. Okay. So if you're printing something like a postcard, you can go in here and say, okay, well, my postcard is probably, like maybe A5 size, and then it'll smoosh it all down. So when you were looking at your printing, now it's like a postcard or like an index card. Okay, so that's size of your paper. So that's when you get into more advanced things of, you know, if you're printing envelopes, you can pick the size of your envelopes down here. So here's some different envelope sizes that you could print out. Here's a 4x6 postcard. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to switch my orientation back to portrait. And I'm going to switch my size back to 8.5 by 11, my standard paper size. Okay, and then cyclone over, that's fine. The next thing I want to show you, how is that okay with everyone? Do we want me to go over anything, show any of that again before I do columns?
I don't see anything so far, but I
Okay.
will keep you updated.
Okay, we're going to move on to columns then. So columns are particularly useful if you want to do a newsletter or like a news article, and it will split, automatically take all your text that you've highlighted and split it into columns. So for example, if I was to take everything here, and again, I'm just highlighting everything all the way down, and switched it to columns and do 2 columns, here's what'll happen. And it'll wrap your text. So start here, come down to here, and then it wraps up at the top. Okay, so this is just turning it into an easy 2-column layout. Okay, and I just wanted to show you that because that's the last of the ones that's in this page setup area. Okay, any questions on layouts? We're using the layout, the page setup layout.
I don't see any so far.
Okay, breaks, line numbers, all this stuff, this is a little bit more advanced, so we'll save that for another class. But here's one where page setup has a dialog box too. So page setup, you'd hit that little, and then you'd get everything there too. Okay, for the page dialog box. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and reverse my columns here. So I don't actually need my columns. So I'm gonna go ahead and reverse that back to 1. And the next thing I'm gonna do is talk about lists. So there's a shortcut for inserting lists into Microsoft Word. And this again might be nice if you were doing a resume and you want to list out the things that you did at a certain job. To do that, we're back on the home menu and we're back in our paragraph group here. And we're going to look at a bulleted list, which looks like this. This is the icon. It's that the one in the top left there. And we're going to work on a numbered list, which works really well if you're doing things like instructions. And then the multi-level list works really well if you're doing things like an outline for if you have to do a formal outline for a paper or something like that. Okay. So we're going to take our text from the Wonderful Wizard of Oz here, and we're going to talk about how they're listing off all the things that are in this room. So the room contained, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a colon. And we're going to say rusty looking cook stove, cupboard for dishes, a table, and 3 or 4 chairs, and a bed. Okay, so I'm just going to turn this quickly into a list. So you do have to do a little bit of the formatting though. You do have to put them out here into like this so that they're each their own line. And then you can highlight it and you can add bullets. So you put it into their own line of text, and then just tap on the bullet. Okay, so anybody want me to show that again? Can show that again. So here we are with each one on its own line, and then I'm going to tap up here where it says bullets and make it a bulleted list. Now something else really cool here is you can change what kind of bullet it looks like too. Like here we've just got these little dots, the little circles. But if you hit this little arrow here, you can make it little pointers. You can make it little fancy little diamonds. You can make them open. You can make it squares. So you could do, a little bit of that if you wanted. Okay. That's a bulleted list. Numbered list. If this was, for example, a list of instructions, you might want it to be a numbered list instead of a bulleted list. You're going to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's the same idea. All you have to do is highlight everything and then tap where it says 1, 2, 3 up here. And then it'll make it a list of what we call an ordered list, which is the step by step. do this, do this. Okay. Questions about that?
We have a hand
Good.
raised.
Okay.
Let me allow them to talk.
Sure.
So if you change the order of those, like maybe put Rusty Looking as the third one, do you have to change the numbers or will they change themselves?
Yeah, so what I usually do if I'm going to do that is I will actually take it, highlight it, and I will do something called cutting it or copying it first to move it. So I do Control X, and then I would come down here, tap here. So you see how if you hit Enter with these, if I hit Enter, it automatically makes a space for it, and then you can put it in there by pasting it there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that's one of the nice things about auto formatting within Word for these lists. If you realize later on you need something in the middle, you can stop here and say, you know, coffee maker, perhaps. You know, so maybe there's a coffee maker. And then if you have, you know, not just beds, but maybe there's a nightstand or whatever, and then you can add them in. And as long as you keep hitting Enter, you can add that next thing. Now, I sometimes have an issue where I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to populate something here, and then I'm going to populate a 10, an 11, and a 12. But with that, you'd have to put something in there like a placeholder. Like usually I just put A's as placeholders, and then I fill them in. Okay, great question.
Yes, I have another question.
Sure.
So like you didn't put anything by number one. Will these all the numbers like sort of just scoot down, or will it say one with nothing next to it?
Yep, it'll say one with nothing next to it unless I put something there. Okay. So if I went to like say our file print here, it'll have that one, nothing next to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep, thank you. That's a great question. So yeah, so if you want to, you would put something in there, and I can, you know, I could take say nightstand, cut it, paste it in there instead. And then to delete one, you just hit the backspace key, and you can delete them out and go back up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So and the same idea rings true for the multi-level lists. So in this case, we don't necessarily have what would work for a multi-level list, but if we were to do a multi-level list, you can use like Roman numerals or you know, the 1.1. So if we did 1.1, you're not going to notice a whole lot yet, but if I hit Enter and then I tab in, I could do, you know, the nightstand has a toothbrush, and the nightstand has a book, and the nightstand has maybe a lamp. And you see that's where you start, you can do your multi-level lists that way. Okay, so for outlines or things like that. So maybe your toothbrush has, you know, bristles like that, and maybe it has a handle. Okay, questions about that? For the multi-level list. I find the multi-level lists are really useful if I'm creating an outline for, say, a formal paper or a formal presentation, or like a process document, perhaps. That's when the multi-level list is really useful. Okay. All right. I've got one more section that I want to talk about today, and that is spelling and grammar and doing some reviewing and proofing of documents. Okay. So what we're going to do up here at the top, this review tab, that's where we're going to spend some time. So if you click on review, and then in the proofing section over here, we've got spelling and grammar and the Thesaurus, and we're going to talk about both of those. So spelling and grammar is going to go through and identify any word that it thinks might be misspelled. So if you look here, when we did cook stove just now, can everybody see that? And it, we're going to hit
yes,
resume,
I can
sorry.
see that.
Resume. So it's identified cook stove. It thinks that word might be misspelled. And the suggestion it's giving us is to put a space between cook and stove. We can ignore it. We can ignore all, which means anywhere in this document where cook stove appears, it will not flag it again, and it will ignore this suggestion for us. I do this a lot with names. So anytime my name is in a document, and if it's, you know, it appears many, many times, I will just say ignore Winkler, because I know Word doesn't know how to spell it. You can also add it to a dictionary, like your last name, so that anytime you're in a document, it doesn't underline your own name every time. That one's a little bit more advanced. If anybody wants to know how to do that, we can share links for how to do that. But for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and say ignore. And it's going to say, okay, we're done. And I'm going to say yes. But note, it just says we're finished checking your selection. This happens to me all the time. It's the selection because cook stove is highlighted. If you want to check the rest of the document, you're going to say yes, and then it's going to check everything else. Okay, so just make sure when you start your spelling and grammar check that nothing is specifically highlighted if you want to do the whole document. Okay. And for example, I'm going to go ahead and tweak this and make an edit so that a word is misspelled here. So you can see, let's see, middle. Okay, I'm going to take that out. Okay, so for example here, the red squiggly line means that Word has identified this as a word that it doesn't recognize. So when I do spelling and grammar, we're gonna ignore on M for now, and we'll ignore that. So this is me ignoring each individual occurrence as opposed to saying ignore all. Okay, now it's brought up middle, or what we thought was middle. Then it's going to give me some suggestions about what I might have meant, because sometimes you might have just made a typo, or sometimes it's for me especially, I'm not great with spelling, so I will often sound out the word and then I'm not spelling it correctly. But Word at least knows what I'm trying to get to. So here I could change it to middle. And then I can say, yes, this is the one I want to use, and I can say change. When I say change, watch what happens in the document. Boom. See how it changed the typing for me? So I didn't have to go back and retype it or type in anything else. It just automatically changed that word for me, which is really nice. Okay, any questions about that? So the spelling and grammar will do a good job of helping you, but it's not going to catch things like there, and there, whether it's, they are doing something, it belongs to them, or it is there on the table, because that has a lot more to do with context than the spelling. So keep that in mind.
Sometimes that happens when you're writing too, like it might be a word that just slips by because it counts because it's spelled right, but it may not be the correct word for the sentence. So it helps to just proofread it yourself even after you do the spelling and grammar stuff.
And sometimes it's gotten good enough that if you see this in blue, the blue means it's a grammar thing. So as opposed to the squiggly line for red, which would be spelling. So, and you can see here, it is actually picking it up. So I changed this to there were 4 walls, and it is saying this should be there. So it might catch some of them now that it didn't catch before. But just keep that in mind too. So it's always good to have someone else proofread your stuff too. So, okay.
We have a raised hand.
Yes, go ahead.
So I do a lot of writing, and I found that you really don't want to count on those spell check things, because there's lots of things that are opposite, like not and now are sort of like opposites, and it'll never catch stuff like that, or even like veto and vote. So you want to just not be thinking that some kind of spell check function is going to get you through, because you might have sloppy mistakes.
Exactly. And that's one thing that we say that spelling and grammar is a good thing. So before you turn it over to someone who's going to proof it for you, it's good to run a spelling and grammar check on it to get it to a good point where someone else can look at it and put someone else's eyes on it. Because so if I change this to not the house, Word's not going to catch that was now. I meant now the house was dull. Word won't catch that. That's going to be where you would, need someone else to proof it for you. Okay, good point. Okay. I wanted to mention the thesaurus up here too. Sometimes when you're writing, if you use the same word a lot, it's sometimes worth it to check and see if there's another word that you could use. And that brings up the thesaurus. So if I wanted to, let's say I've used the word cyclone a whole bunch. This one will be fun. I didn't actually know if it'll do it. And you highlight the word that you're looking for and hit thesaurus, and then it should give you some other words you could possibly use instead. Okay, so if I'd use the word cyclone a whole bunch in here, then maybe I would come over here and say tornado instead. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the thesaurus real quick as well. And then the last thing, we're almost done. So for those of you that have stuck around, thank you, appreciate it. And again, we have the recording of this, so anybody can watch the recording too, is the find, replace, and select, which if we go back to home, but this does relate to proofing and editing. So the home and editing group all the way over here on the right-hand side. Find lets you find certain text or certain word wherever it appears in the document. So if we realize that, oops, we didn't mean to spell it this way, we can find every instance of it where that word appears. Or if you wanted to check how many times have I actually used the word cyclone in this first chapter, you know, should I use, you know, use it once and then pick something different, and I've actually used it 20 times. You know, here M is mentioned 11 times. But anyway, this just gives you a chance to kind of see how many times you've used a word. The replace option, so that's navigation there. The replace option up here lets you replace that word. So if I find M and I want to replace it with Emily, I can say replace all. I can replace it once, or I can replace all of them, and then I can move on to the next thing I wanna replace. So if I hit replace all, it's gonna say all done, we've made 11 replacements, and now you'll see instead of Aunt M, it says Aunt Emily. Okay, so that's something you can also utilize. Select lets you select certain things within your document. But the one I want to point out for today is select all, because that's a pretty useful thing when you're having to do all this highlighting of stuff. If you hit select all, that's actually just going to go ahead and select all the text in your document here. And then you can do whatever you need to do, like setting it all to be left justified or in the middle or whatever you need to do. So I wanted to make sure I pointed out select all. You can also do select all text with similar formatting, and that's where you can get into some more advanced stuff that's beyond the scope of today's class. But I just wanted to let you know that you could use that select all to select everything in your document. Okay, questions about that? We covered an awful lot today. So
I don't see any questions, but you know, if anybody has one that they would like to speak rather than type, feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
I'll give you a minute for that. I'm also going to pull up, while we wait for questions, I will pull up a couple of the resources like GCF. So one of the, there's a couple of things that I really like for tutorials, and GCFlearnfree.org is a great place to go for tech tutorials. And it's free. You can find it, you just have to get to it on the web. And they will walk you through creating and opening documents, sharing and saving them just like we did, texting, formatting, indents and tabs, all the stuff that we just covered. So if you want a refresher or a review of things like page layout, all that kind of stuff, this is a great way to start walking through it. We're gonna get to pictures and formatting pictures and shapes next in our part 3 class, which is 2 Tuesdays from now. So please feel free to sign up for that and join us for that as well. The other one I want to show you is we do have some resources for those of you with Champaign library cards, where if you come to our e-library and go to online tools, we have 2 things that I want to point out, which is, one of them is Gale courses. And with a library card, you can sign up for an account, and then you can look at all the different classes that they have. And they have a bunch of classes for things like Microsoft, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, where you can learn how to use them a little bit more in depth than what we do in these 3 sessions. So that's a good idea too. And then LinkedIn Learning has a whole bunch of video topics, once you've signed in, and they break it down so that you can even get certification after watching some videos about the different topics. And they have a bunch of them on Word as well. Okay. All righty. Any other questions so far?
I don't see any so far, but I'm putting our emails in the chat as well.
Perfect. I was going to say, here are, and if you want, we can send the PowerPoint to everyone, and we'll send, for everyone that attended today, we'll send you the link to the video when it's ready, and we'll send you a copy of this PowerPoint too, so you can see all of the additional resources. And then here is my contact information, if you'd like to reach out to me directly with questions. Rebecca will also put hers in the chat as well. And then the upcoming, so on the 29th is part 3. And then in January, we start our spring season, and that will start with introductions to iPhones and iPads, your Android phones and tablets. And then we have a new class, so we'll do Intro to Windows Computers, and then we have a new class that we're teaching for the first time. Rebecca's teaching this for us, the Intro to Apple Computers class. So if you have a Mac and you've been wondering about how to do things in the Mac environment, this will be the first time we're teaching that, but we do encourage you to come to that as well. And let anyone else know that has an Apple computer who might be interested. We're more than happy to have everyone come to that. The Internet Safety and Security is at 7 p.m. on the 25th. That's a Monday night. That is going to be with the Illinois Attorney General's office. They're going to talk about some of the current scams and identity theft scams to watch out for, and some general tips about how to shop, being secure online. And okay. And then again, our book a librarian. I know Rebecca mentioned this earlier, the champaign.org/book-librarian. And we also have live chat when the library is available for our virtual services. And then you can also reach out at librarian@champaign.org. All right. Any other questions, feedback, comments? Oh, I'll jump back in here and put my video back on. Let me stop sharing that. Oops. Stop sharing, jump back in, and I'll put the video back on. Okay. Let's see if I can get my video to actually catch up to me.
There we go. I saw it for a second.
Let's see if it'll catch up. It's frozen on my side. Hold on.
It's showing your name.
Come on, video. Okay.
There we go.
Now I can see myself. I don't know if anybody else can see me or not.
Yes, I can see you.
Okay. There we go. All right. So, other questions? And again, we do take feedback if there's classes you want to see us teach, or we can always bring in outside presenters to teach something. So just let us know if there's things you'd like to see us do in the future. All right.
We've definitely crafted classes around what people have suggested. So don't feel like if you throw something out there, it won't be done, because we've definitely done stuff before like that.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely want to work for you and help you get where you want to be. So yeah. Okay.
Other than that, I don't see any more questions, but you know, we're always here via email or phone, so feel free to reach out.
And thank you for sticking with us for the extra 25 minutes there to get through everything. I appreciate it. And everything builds. So what we learned last week and this week will build for 2 weeks from now. But you don't necessarily have to take them in order for this little part 1, part 2, part 3. You can jump in at any point, and we'll get you there. So, all right.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody. We look forward to seeing you for the next class.
Yeah. Thanks for coming today.
Have a good one.